Welcome. In this video, I'll provide a few tips and tricks on the indent feature in Smartsheet. These tips and tricks videos are designed for all types of Smartsheet users. And for this video, the content is aimed at users that are relatively new to Smartsheet. Smartsheet includes a powerful organizational feature, the Indent Tool, which allows for creating row hierarchies. Rather than having to view and sort through hundreds of rows in a sheet, you can easily condense your data so that you can focus on a particular section of the sheet and see how it relates to the sheet as a whole. This feature is often used when you have a lot of rows in your sheet and you need to organize your sheet into categories, sections, or by owner, and so on. It provides a way to see a high-level summary of all the sections in the sheet when collapsed, and it provides a way for users to focus in on the section of the sheet they are working with. It also allows for multi-level indentation, and there's no limit to the number of levels in the hierarchy. However, in practice you probably don't want to create more than 2 or 3 levels. Another cool feature with indentation is that you can easily create roll-up data or calculated values based on the hierarchy. So let's take a look at some of these features. You can create a hierarchy in your sheet by indenting rows. When you indent a row, it becomes a child of the row above it, which is referred to as the parent row. Note that the hierarchy is created from the child row. It can't be created from the parent row. So if I click on this second row, you can see it's the child row and the row above it is the parent row. So you can't create a hierarchy by making a row a parent. You need to select the row below that and click on the indent button, and then the row above it becomes the parent. It's also important to note that the indenting feature creates a relationship between the rows in the sheet, but it does not control any formatting. The indentation also does not get carried through to reports. So as we've seen, to indent a row, click the cell on the first row that you would like to indent, and then click the indent button, and then that creates the indentation, and the row above it becomes the parent row. And then you can see that the parent rows have these little buttons on them. When they are expanded, then they show a minus sign. When they are collapsed, then they show a plus sign. So that's how you can expand and collapse the different sections in your sheet. It's also important to note that the indentation is only showing up in the primary column of the sheet. However, the relationship is applied to all the columns in the sheet, but the indentation itself is only visible in the primary column of the sheet. Okay, so let's undo these indentations, and now that we've covered some of the basics, let's apply some indentation to our sample sheet. In this sheet, you'll notice that I have a column called category, and I have several different categories, but each row is assigned to at least one of these categories. In this case, I'd like to create a structure in my sheet so that I can group all of the rows associated with each category together and be able to expand and collapse those groups of rows together. Before we get started, let me show you what the result would look like. Here we have the final version of the sheet. You can see that I can collapse all the sections by going to the primary column, clicking on the column menu, and using the collapse all function. In this way, I can see an overall list of all of the categories. You can also see that I've applied some conditional formatting to this sheet to make it easier to see the sections visually. To expand everything, I go to the column menu on the primary column, click the button and select expand all. And now I can collapse certain sections and just focus in on the sections that I need to work with at this time. Now let's switch back to the source sheet and I'll show you how that's done. Step 1 is to make sure that all the rows for each category are arranged together. You can do this a couple of ways. You can either manually move the rows around by clicking and dragging. So for example, I can drag this Recording Studios row and rearrange it to a different part of the sheet. Or you can use the sort function in the category column to sort the categories in a specific order. Then in step 2, you'll add new rows for each category. These new rows will act as header rows for each category. They don't need to contain much information other than the name of the category. We'll keep this simple for now and just add a header for each row section. So this first section, the category is called Published Reports. So I'll add a header row for Published Reports. And then I'll do the same for each of the other sections of the sheet. So I'll just do one more. I'll call this Expired Reports. So now we have 2 header rows for these first two categories of rows in the sheet. Now the next step is to create the hierarchy. So the way to do this is to select all of the rows that I want to have included in the section, and so I'll click on the row selection box on the left hand side of the row of the first row, scroll down and hold my shift key and click again, and then now I've selected all of the rows in that first section. And now I can click on the indent button. So I click on the indent button, and all of those rows that I selected are now children rows of the Published Reports header row. So I can click on the minus button and I can collapse all of those rows into the header row of the first section. So scrolling down, I can go to the expired reports and do the same thing. Select the first row of expired reports, go down and select the last row of expired reports, and now I can click the indent button, and those items are now also indented under expired reports, and I can collapse and expand that section as well. So I'll just save those changes. So one of the challenges that you'll see is that if you have lots of columns in this sheet, if you scroll to the right, you lose the context of which section you're looking at, because the indentation structure is only visible in the primary column. So one thing that you can do to address this is to manually change the background color for the header rows, and once you've done that, I'll just do it for these two. Then you can, if you scroll to the left and right, you'll be able to see the different sections highlighted by a different color. So that's a good best practice, but one of the challenges with that, especially if you have multiple users in the sheet, is that they can forget to do the background color, or they can use different formatting and the content becomes inconsistent. So one trick that I like to use to fix this is called conditional formatting. So in conditional formatting, you need to select a unique value in one of the columns for each of the header rows. So for example, in this case, I'm going to use the status column, and the status column I've added a drop-down option called section header. So I can use section header to identify the header rows for each section. And then together with that, I've added conditional formatting. So I have a rule in the conditional formatting feature where wherever the status is equal to section header, then I'm going to apply this gray background, and I'm going to apply it to the entire row. So what happens is when I select that section header option from the drop-down list, it automatically applies this formatting. I've also added bold to the font, so it makes it stand out a little more. So then once you've created all of your section headers in your sheet, then you can go through them and set the status to section header, and then you can automatically highlight the header rows in your sheet by using conditional formatting. So as you can see, this formatting now makes it much easier to see which rows are the section headers in the sheet. So now I'll switch over to the final version to show you a few more tips and tricks. So if you need to move an entire section to a different place in the sheet, you can simply collapse that section and then use drag and drop, and you can move the entire section to a different part of the sheet just by dragging and dropping. If you need to outdent a row or section, you can select the child row and then simply click the outdent button, and then that removes that parent-child relationship with the row above it. But you need to be careful doing this, because as you can see, this row is no longer a child of the curriculum reports row, but now it's a parent of the row below it. So you've changed the hierarchical structure by doing that one outdent. You may think that you can use the indent button again to fix that problem, but if you do that, you'll see now you've created another problem. So this initial row is now a child of the section header, which is what you want. Unfortunately, now the child below it is indented as well. So just be careful when you are using the outdent button once you have this structure, that you're not breaking the overall hierarchical structure. One last tip relating to indentation is to remember that if you create these sections with header rows, while there is a relationship between the parent row and the child rows, this relationship does not get carried over to a report or a summary sheet. In other words, if you have several sheets that all use the same layout, then you create a report that pulls rows from those sheets based on certain criteria. So for example, if you want to pull all of the rows that have sent from equal to no email, then you may lose the context of the sections in that summary report. So I have created a report like that. Let me switch over and I'll show you what it looks like. So in this case, the report looking at one sheet, but this could be pulling data from multiple sheets having the same structure, and I'm looking for where the sent from column is equal to no email. So it's pulling out just certain rows that meet that criteria. But now you'll see as I scroll through this, I don't have the header rows in this report because they don't meet that criteria, and I also don't know which sections any of these rows are associated with. So to fix that, just make sure that you have a column in the sheet, like for example we have the category column, and the category column is the same as the header row value. So to fix this report, all I need to do is to make sure that I've pulled in the category column into the report structure. So now if I go back, I have this category column, and I can see that these rows are all from the published reports section, whereas these rows are from the partner reports, this is from the stakeholder report section, and so on. So I have the category context now in my report. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe to our channel to see more tips and tricks on topics such as conditional formatting, parent and child formulas, and more.